Okay, so it's one of the most asked about questions I see. Look, how much is my pension pot going to give me? And that's exactly what I'm going to go over in today's episode. And to be honest, as an advisor, doing this day in, day out, it's the question that probably makes me go, the most. Not because I can't answer the question, but just because it simply cannot be answered with a simple this or that.
I still don't get it.
But in this video, I'm going to be showing you some of the modelling, which can help you get a good idea. I'll be explaining some of the big and hidden pitfalls I see from people who are trying to do this themselves. And I'll be telling you what you need to be thinking about. Okay, so there's no point just throwing in a few figures without some context, as this is going to be absolutely essential for you understanding this, and without it, everything's going to be completely wrong. So we need to firstly go over some of the variables and what that means. And if you get any of these variables wrong, your conclusion is going to be well off, which could mean retiring later than you should, or potentially earlier than you can afford. Remember, there are two risks in retirement: running out of money and leaving opportunities unfulfilled. Okay, so assumption one is retirement options. We firstly need to understand what type of income you're going to take in retirement. And look, there are only really two main options. The first is a flexible income, so either a mixture of lump sums taken ad hoc or flexi access drawdown, where effectively you have a pot of money that's subject to investment performance and fluctuations, and it lasts as long as it lasts. Then you have an annuity, which is a guaranteed income for life, where you get a fixed income which you exchange for a lump sum at the outset. Now, there are quite a few options in between the two, like blending, and almost in fact everyone will be blending secure income and non-secure income to a degree in retirement, as because they're likely to have the state pension, and then they'll probably have a pension or an ISA. But there is also some more complexity around the edges, things like fixed term annuities and other bits I've mentioned in earlier videos. But for the sake of this video, these are going to be the two options at the start, and you'll either need to know your pot size for drawing down on, or your pot size and the best annuity rate you can get. Okay, so the second assumption is growth rates. So this is if you take the invested route, and any invested amount, a huge assumption is going to be, okay, what are the growth rates that you're going to use? Now, growth rate expectations change over time. For example, if I show you some recent ones from Vanguard, you can see even last year when the market declined across the year, future expectations of returns increased. So if you're doing your own modelling, you need to make sure you've got a good idea of what is reasonable. And the growth rates, they're going to be heavily driven by your asset allocation, what you're invested in. Because as long as you're well diversified, the higher the equity content, the higher the expected, not guaranteed, return. But the key thing is you are exchanging that return expectation for volatility, as in the ups and downs that are perfectly normal but will come along the way. Okay, the next assumption is longevity. How long are you going to live? And clearly not an easy one to define, because no one knows how long they're going to live. So how I'd run this with my clients is I run to age 100 unless there's a known health issue, whether a medical advice tells us otherwise. Now, that doesn't mean we expect an individual to live to age 100. We look at things like their health, ONS, and so forth. But please, as a word of warning, don't just be one of those people who says, I just know I'm not going to make it past 75. I mean, you could be right, but what if you're wrong? We can't plan like that. The reason why it's important to run to age 100 normally on a standard model is because then when we stress test it as well, we need to factor in that things might not work out as well as we thought for returns. Okay, so assumption 4 is expenditure. Not just what you spend now, but what are you likely to spend over time? What are the spending shocks? As in, if you think about the last 5 years, how many big expenditures in your situation came out of nowhere? Maybe it was none, or maybe it was a lot. And whether that's fixing a roof or maybe care. Most importantly, it's about doing as much as we can and not leaving things on the table as far as expenditure. Now, the fifth assumption is the big one for this year, is inflation. And look, right now, inflation is over 10%. And it isn't expected to continue at that level. But it has brought into focus that over the long term, inflation is the silent killer to your savings. You don't really see it. It's tough to notice on a day-by-day basis. But then you wake up 10 years later in retirement and realise you can't afford what you used to. And if we don't plan properly, you could be screwed. And this is the really crucial thing you need to understand. Over a completely bog standard retirement, we expect the price of what you are paying for something at the start of retirement to almost triple by the end. And not getting this right can be the difference between a retirement of dignity and freedom to one which could be very challenging. And assumption 6 is charges and taxes. And probably shouldn't have thrown these together. Simple enough, right, though. I've included them together because they're not the same. But we both know that there are costs that are going to affect how long our pot lasts. My job as an advisor is to reduce taxes and to make sure that charges, even for myself, are fully worthwhile, and basically that the individual comes out better than when they came in. Anyway, hopefully now you can see why retirement is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Each of those variables could have many different scenarios which have to be navigated. So there we go, there's a framework. Enough of me telling you the issues. I've given you a clear explanation into why what I'm about to say is limited, but you want to hear how much you're going to get, and you want the answer now. And look, I get it. So let's run through an example. Okay, so what we're going to do first is let's set our individuals up. They've got very vanilla planning needs. You know, they're both 60 and they want to retire immediately. For simplicity, we're going to assume they've both got full state pensions and they've come to me with 250 grand each split down the middle. So they have 500k in private pensions. Convenient, right? All right, so I'm going to introduce you to one of the key tools we use called cash flow modeling. This is professional level software which basically allows us to consider all of your financial position, you know, taxes, growth rates, what that's likely to develop over retirement. You need to think of it like a sat nav for your car. You know, the sat nav isn't the journey, that's real life. But the sat nav tells you how long it's going to take till you get there, advises you the best route, and crucially tells you how to avoid traffic on the way. And my job as a planner is then to use my experience, having done this for thousands of individuals, to get you to the desired destination as quickly and as cost effectively as possible. So I'm not going to do any fancy planning stuff here on strategy. I'm just going to basically put in the inputs, see what it spits out, and give you my thoughts. I do want to say that everything I've done here is a hugely watered down version of everything that we have to do for retirement planning. There's no real way that I can show you something which is individual and can apply to everyone. So you're going to have to cut me some slack on that. Okay then, so let's dive in and have a look at a quick plan. So just to show you very briefly, if it's in blue, that means that there's not a shortfall. In red, that means we've run out of money. So that's clearly not a good thing. So that's the key thing you just need to have a look for when we're looking at this cash flow model. So why it's flicking red is that basically I'm turning off the income that's coming in. So here are the values, two £250,000 pensions, full state pension, and I've started with £35,000 a year. And actually, as you can see, I should say, by the way, that the growth rate I've assumed is 6%, and I've just gone for a charge of 0.75%, kind of felt in the middle. So if we have a look at this is actually showing us that, yeah, do you know what? The funds are lasting to 100, which is great. The problem that I'm having though is that when we have a look at this performance insight and we actually adjust this performance down slightly, which basically reduces down 1% on the return for each year, each of the little tiers that I move it down on, we can see we've gone all the way from 100 to 88, which is getting very close to normal life expectancy. And what that's telling us is that the plan is very reliant on investment growth. In fact, if we were to see a loss of just 3.84% on this loss calculator, we can see that we're going to have some issues as far as having the funds run to 100. So that immediately is showing a few red flags and saying that, well, hold on, while there should be sufficient funds to last to £35,000 per year adjusted with inflation going forward, we do have to be very careful. In fact, if I then run this via a market crash modeler, where I effectively assume that there is a market crash immediately on their 60th birthday, you can see the impact of sequencing risk, which is something I've mentioned on other videos, is very high in this instance, which is not good. The funds are running out in the early 80s, which isn't acceptable. So as an advisor, that's something I'd be really careful on. And if you're one of those individuals that likes to know the probabilistic position, well, while the probability of success is reasonable, 88%, if we have a look at a Monte Carlo simulation, which is basically running lots and lots of different scenarios, it's still not out of the woods, and it's something that I'd have to be planning very strategically for them both. So just before I jump into the next plan, watch this. I have a special offer for all the good people who watch my channel. Exclusive to you is how to avoid expensive retirement mistakes in my free ebook, 5 pension tax mistakes to avoid, showing you the most common tax mistakes, how to avoid them. But you don't just get that, you also get a 5-day email sequence which will tell you about the science behind living great retirement, what your most valuable asset is, and also you'll get access to my only available to newsletter subscribers life-changing retirement masterclass, where I show you step by step the secrets of how I plan for my clients. You'll also be part of my mailers, get exclusive access to updates as they come in on things like the budget and the secrets from an industry insider. Okay, so this one, now let's try and see what the position is. Not only if we have less money, so £250,000 between both of them, but also if we split it unequally. It's quite rare to get perfectly equal splits between partners. So let's see what happens if we've got 200,000 held by one partner and 50 held by the other. Okay, so I've dropped the expenditure down because clearly we can't start with the same expenditure, and I've just tried 28,000. You know, would they be able to achieve 28,000? Bear in mind that 20,000 at state pension age, give or take, or more than that, is going to be met by the state pensions that they both have. So actually, as you can see, we are getting the funds running out in that instance at 28,000 way too early. However, if we were to adjust the returns upwards, which are already pretty punchy with 6%, you can see that does have an impact. But if we adjust it down, we can see we've got funds running out in the late 70s, or actually the mid 70s, I should say. So that's just a great example of ultimately that would be a plan that I would say would be a definite fail, and I'd be looking at other mitigation strategies as part of the planning there. Interesting as well is that when we have a look at the tax position, because 250,000 over retirement actually isn't that much and we can still utilise allowances, it is just showing exactly what I would expect, which is that when we compare the two plans and split it with an equal split, you're going to pay more tax for the unequal split because I've got less to work with as far as the two persons allowances. And when I'm planning for a family or, you know, a couple's retirement, I will be looking at how we can utilize those allowances in the most tax efficient way. Okay, and finally, let's just try 100,000 for one person. If they wanted to retire at 60, what could they realistically achieve? It's not going to be that much. I've taken a stab at 12,500, which does appear to work. Keep in mind the state pension is 10,600 if it's full, so that you're not getting that much, but you are getting that period from 60 to state pension age where that could provide support. The big problem is there that because there's so much of the fund that's getting drawn down in the earlier years, it is hugely open to market crashes, sequencing risk, and for me that would be an absolute fail. Even at 12,500, I wouldn't be comfortable with that level of planning, and we'd be looking at other mitigation strategies. So I think it just goes to show the importance of saving into a pension, because even with £100,000, which is not an inconsiderable amount of money, across a person's full retirement, it just isn't enough to get certainly a standard of life that most people would want. You might have been a bit concerned when we looked at the market crash as the impact of that on the fund, and that's because what's called sequencing risk has a huge impact. Now, I talk about the pension hacks that you can potentially use to save your retirement from a market crash. So if you are concerned about that, you really do need to watch this video.